Okay, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to spend about 20 minutes of your time and just go through the project a bit, tell you where we are and where we're going. So I'll start things off. Some of you may not know about the project. Webequie Supply Road is a planned 107-kilometer road running from Webequie First Station, the airport there, southeast to east of the Buckatai River in the McFalds Lake area. So we've just completed the bulk of the environmental assessment, impact assessment, and you'll see a couple of maps here on your screen. It's obviously pretty hard to see, but on this map is the proposed route for the Webequie Supply Road, and we've also included on the map locations of possible aggregate sites, so sites where we would get the material to build the road with, and then where the construction camps are as well too. And then the map you see below that shows where the Webequie Supply Road is with the other two all-season roads that are going through environmental assessments as well. So to the south of the Webequie Supply Road is the Northern Road Link, which is a planned road that would extend from the Ring of Fire, McFalds Lake area, south to west of Martin Falls, where it would connect with the Martin Falls Community Access Road, which would then extend down to meet up with a couple of upgraded resource roads that ultimately connect with the highway. So in terms of the purpose of the Webequie Supply Road, three main purposes: moving materials, supplies, and people from the airport to the McFalds Lake area, providing employment and economic development opportunities to community members while allowing them to remain in their community and preserve and enhance their language and culture. And then finally, to provide experience and training opportunities to youth to help encourage them to pursue more education, post-secondary education as well. So those are the main purposes of the road. In terms of the project itself, again, it's 107 kilometers, two-lane, planned to be a two-lane road. 17 of those kilometers sit on reserve lands themselves. The kilometer, or the corridor would be about 35 meters in width. It would cross about, I think, 27 or 28 rivers, streams, lakes, four bridges, so larger crossings. The biggest one would be the crossing of Winisk Lake from the island where the settlement is to the mainland, and that's about 200 to 250 meters. Some things that are important to remember about this project. The first is that this is Webequie's road. Webequie is what you call the proponent. They're the leader of the project. It was their idea. They approached the government with this project, and then entered into an environmental impact and impact assessment. They are, and always will be, the caretakers or stewards of the land, and that role will continue during construction and operation of the road. And that will, as you'll see later on, that offers a lot of opportunities for community members to learn new skills and help take care of their backyard, essentially. And a big part of what is trying to be achieved as part of this project is knowledge transfer to community members. So we as a technical team are sharing our knowledge and experience with community members. They share theirs with us. As we move forward, this will continue through construction and through operations, with the purpose being an ultimate handover to the community as soon as possible, so that the community can take over the responsibility of making sure that the project meets the commitments that are made as part of this process, to make sure that the effects that we predict are happening within the range of what we predict, that nothing terrible or beyond what was expected is happening, and that the construction and operation management plans, which are really detailed plans that explain how to do different activities during construction with the purpose of protecting the environment. The idea is community members would be heavily involved in that, and then ultimately leading that activity to make sure that that their territory is the community members' territory is protected. Another thing to remember is that we're going to talk a lot about potential effects tonight. Every project has effects. There's no project that doesn't have any effects, and the challenge is making sure you use the best ways, best methods, and practices of minimizing or eliminating these predicted effects. So during the construction and operations, even if the environmental assessment is approved and that permit is obtained to go ahead with the project, there's a lot of oversight. So things will be watched and monitored to make sure that they're done according to the way that they're supposed to be done. So there's going to be an environment committee that'll consist of community members of neighboring communities as well too, and they would work in close communication with the project team and use their indigenous knowledge and knowledge of cultural protocols combined with the Western knowledge to make sure that the project is executed and done properly. I mentioned earlier that there will be community members who will be environmental monitors, and a lot of them. These will help during the road construction and operation. They are the ones that will make sure that the construction and environmental management plans are actually followed. So what are potential project effects? So potential project effects are associated with each what you call valued component. Valued components are the things that were identified usually before and at the beginning of the project as things that are important to community members to protect, and by government regulators to protect as well too, special interest groups. So there's effects, these potential effects are associated with these things called valued components or VCs. Potential project effects are effects that could be caused by construction or operations of the project. Each effect has a pathway, a route a way that it happens, a route followed. So just to give you an example, if you look at grading a road where you smooth out a road, if it has potholes in it and you use a grader to smooth out a road, what that can do is compress the soil on the surface and make it less able for water to go through it. And if that happens, what happens is if it happens over a long period of time, the groundwater the levels start to lower because the water can't get through the soil. So there's ways of mitigating that or reducing those impacts, and I'll get to those in a second. So now let's talk about what mitigation is. Mitigation is a way of reducing or eliminating these effects. You can do it in lots of different ways. You can eliminate or avoid effects. You could move the position of the road to avoid impact on an area, for example. You could reduce effects, or you can do things that are improvements someplace else. So even if you're going to have effects in one area where the road is, and you know that, there may be another area that you could improve to compensate, to make up for that. So there's another term that we use called net effects. What net effects are is if you take the potential effects of the project and you subtract mitigation, right? The ways, the reduction in the effects by using different ways of doing things, you get some effects left over in a lot of cases. So that's what net effects are. They're the leftover effects. So when we talk about effects or net effects, we need to describe these, because just because we're predicting there might be some effects doesn't mean they'll actually happen. So we can describe them in a bunch of different ways. We can describe the direction of the change, whether it's a good effect, positive, because a lot of effects are good, but some are negative. We can talk about the amount of the change in terms of an effect, the area that's impacted by the effect, when the effect will occur, how long it will last, how often it will occur, any social or cultural effects, so on people, effects on people, and then whether the effect will be permanent and how likely the effect is to occur. So there's lots of, when you look at effects, that doesn't mean they're all going to happen, but there's lots of ways of describing them to have an understanding of them better. So what I wanted to do now is talk about, use an example of surface water to walk through potential effects. So before I do that, I want to talk about some of the words that we use when we talk about working with water in construction. So there's a word called dewatering. So with dewatering, what you're doing is you're moving water, pumping water from one area to another area because you need to have a dry area to work in. So for example, if you're building a bridge, you need to shift the water away from where the bridge is supposed to go. So usually you create a temporary sort of channel for the water to go, and then you pump the water out of that area so that it's dry, so that the construction can occur, and then they basically move part of the river back, just where that crossing is. So that's called dewatering, removing water. The second thing is water taking. What we talk about when we talk about water taking, it means using water to do something on the project. So if there's dust on the road, you use water that's available to fill up a water truck, and then the water truck sprays the water on the road to keep the dust down. And then the third thing that I wanted to tell everyone about is water discharges. So when you talk about water discharges, it's releasing that water that you're taking from one area into another area. So let's look at those three things right now and the possible effects. So when you do things like moving water from one place to another for construction, you can also move some soil particles, we call it sediment, at the same time. And you're moving them from one place to another place. So sometimes that can move chemicals attached to them, those particles, to another area. So it can affect water quality. But there's ways of protecting against that. And in Ontario, we have a very strict system of getting permits to take water, and they involve doing studies beforehand, checking the water quality when you discharge the water into another area. So there's a lot of protections when you do things like water taking or dewatering. Another activity that you see commonly to build roads is right at the beginning, and it's clearing vegetation and clearing and grubbing, which means basically removing all the vegetation from the area that you have to build the road in. So this can have, and you can imagine this can have negative impacts because all those plants, trees get removed, and what happens is you can get changes to how fast water runs off because it's no longer got vegetation that it can seep into and be taken up by trees and plants. Sometimes the soil gets compressed so the water can't go down in through the ground, and it changes the direction of the flow of water as well too. So, but there's lots of ways you can mitigate or reduce those impacts. So areas that are temporarily disturbed can be restored by loosening up the soil afterwards so that the water can go through. You can also replant these areas, and this is all typically done, once the project is complete, you restore the area and you do things like this. Then there's one of the biggest projects is building culverts and bridges, and one of the biggest parts of projects. So when you build a bridge across a river or stream or a lake, there's a lot of it's a big exercise, and there can be soil like getting that goes into the rivers and streams. So there's lots of different ways, and you've seen them, I'm sure, before when you see bridges under construction or when they install those big culvert pipes, and they use things like sediment fences to prevent the soil from eroding into the rivers and streams. They use sedimentation ponds and erosion control fabric. There's lots of different techniques to make sure that where they build the bridge, they're not causing too much damage, too much soil from getting into the water and affecting the fish habitat. Um, then other things like spills response, storage and handling of materials, chemicals that are used, fuel. Excuse me. Um, you can do other things like time construction activities when the water levels are lowest, so there's less impact. You can conduct in-water activities during the right timing windows, and most of this is directed by government agencies. So they say, you can't do work in the water between this date and this date, and that's done to protect, in many cases, fish habitat, especially spawning seasons, things like that. You'll see it for birds in migratory season and nesting season. Roadway drainage design is another thing. You'll see these ditches on the sides of roads. They're there for a reason. They collect the water from the road that runs off, and the idea is to move that water off, to be collected off the road and take it someplace else. But it's also to slow down the water and to allow the soil particles in the water to settle out, because a lot of them will have maybe chemicals associated with fuel or oil that come off vehicles. So you want that to settle out before it goes into rivers and streams. So you call these little ditches swales, and they have lots of different ways now of making these really effective by doing plantings as well too. Then you have accidental spills and leaks. These do happen sometimes. The idea is to keep these things from happening to a minimum. We know like a fuel spill could contaminate water bodies, oil spills, things like that. But again, there's a lot of safeguards against this by storing chemicals like oil and gas properly so that you don't get leakage. And then if there is a spill, having a response plan in place, which is usually in the construction and environmental management plan. And I can tell you, seeing it in action, these plans, even a tiny little spill, it doesn't matter how little, the soil has to be collected, it has to be put in a bag and then disposed of in the right place. So the rules around this kind of stuff are very, very strict. And then there's rock blasting. So when they need to get the stone to build the road, sometimes they have to do blasting. The idea is to avoid this as much as possible, because obviously it's loud, it causes vibration, it can disturb wildlife, it can disturb water wells that are in the area. So the best way of mitigating or reducing the effects of blasting is to not blast and use other techniques to get the rock and that you need to grind up to get you the material to build the road. And then just stepping back and looking at construction and operation activities. So things like grading the road, leveling the road can cause dust, and that dust can settle out on plants. It can settle out in the water. So it can affect air quality, it can affect water quality, it can affect plants. So the idea is to keep these areas moist when dust starts to build up. And again, I talked about using water, local water, to fill up the water trucks and then keep the to keep the dust down, because dust creates a safety hazard too, because you can't see as well, right? So cars coming the other direction can't see. So there's mainly water, but there's also other chemicals that can be used, and they're getting more sophisticated now, so that they don't cause damage to the environment as well. Waste disposal. There will be 4 camps along this route, and there'll be a lot of people living at these camps for periods of time. A lot of waste gets created, liquid waste, solid waste. So there's a very detailed waste management plan that is put together for projects like this. The idea is to reduce the waste as much as possible. And then, there's places where the different types of waste go to be disposed of properly. It doesn't just they don't just dig a hole and just throw it in there. So there's a plan, it's enforced, it's done in a really strict way. And things like liquid waste, like sewage and wastewater, these are dealt with in their own way as well too, but it's all the ways that these all have to be dealt with are all detailed in the construction and environmental management plan. So, what are our next steps? So now, we are almost at the point now, as of October 7th, where our draft environmental assessment report, that giant document, you see all those binders on the table back there? That's one copy of the report, so it's thousands of pages. And we're almost at the point where the 60-day period of reviewing that document is complete. There were 30 days for neighboring indigenous communities, and then another 30 days for stakeholders and the general public. So during that time, we've been receiving comments. We'll probably get a lot of comments towards the end of that, and it's our job to look at every comment and provide a response to every comment. So every comment doesn't mean we have to act on it. It just depends, but we have to respond to each one. So some of these comments might change our report. Some of these comments might result in us making more commitments, more promises for things to do if the project's approved. There could be lots of things that end up from these comments, but we're still talking to you. We're still talking to other communities as well to get feedback about the project. So if you have any comments or questions, you can still contact us, request a meeting, and we'll sit down with you and talk to you as well too. So that giant report there, you don't have to read that version of it because it's big and some parts are hard to understand. We have versions that are easier to understand. We have what you call plain language summaries for different sections. That'll make it a lot easier to understand. We have learning modules, so if you go to our website, you can access stuff online, information online that'll help you understand what we found in doing our work, and explain in plain, simple language what potential impacts might be, and how we can mitigate or control those impacts. So the website has a lot of information. You don't have to go through that huge document if you don't want to. There's other ways of getting access to the information. So that's what we're trying to do, is reach out to as many people as possible so they can understand the project, understand the effects of the project. And we're trying to be open and transparent about all of this. So that is October 7th when that period is done. And then next year, 2026, two big things will be happening. The first thing is, after we take all those comments and answer them all, we make changes to that giant document back there. We then send it back for review again. So it goes back out again to government and to communities as well. So that'll go through another period of review. And then after that, once we finish that period, we make any final changes. It then goes to the government of Ontario, and it goes to Canada, and they go through it, and then they make a decision on the project whether to approve the environmental assessment or not, or send it back to us to address any holes or gaps that they might find. So 2026, sometime in 2026, we're not sure exactly when, we will get an answer on the project. We hope, we hope it's sooner rather than later, but that's the schedule that that we're dealing with. So with that, I'm done talking. If anybody has any questions, you look happy that I'm done talking. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions, we've got a bunch of us here roaming around the room. So I'll shut this off and walk around, and if anyone has questions, just ask any of the project team. Does the project team want to put up their hands so that they know who to talk to? So those are the people. You got questions? You can ask any of us. There's a question there? Yep. Oh, good. Sure. You got a microphone or? Oh, might as well. You're just sitting there.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to sing. I wouldn't recommend it. Okay. First of all, my name is Marcia Smoke. I'm from the First Nation community in Alderville, Ontario, which is in southeastern Ontario. We're just around southeast of Peterborough, Ontario. I do have a business, and so my questions will be in relation to your future development. So I know it's a lengthy process, and I actually thank you. I think I've participated or listened in on some of the webinars that you've you've offered over the years. So, but I haven't really followed the project too closely in the last little while. I did hear the presentation yesterday over at the Valhalla, so that was great. So, knowing that it's going to be still a ways down the road, is there any potential date for construction once you get through all of your all the groundwork, all the paperwork?
It's possible. I'm looking into the crystal ball here, of course.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that it could start sometime, probably later in 2027, but that is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometime in 2027, I think is
Just a ballpark.
Yep.
That's great. Thanks. Okay.
No problem.
And so the next question I have is when you get to the stage of getting ready to build the road, will you be putting out to tender, bidding process, who the company would be to be the general contractor?
Yeah, I mean, we're not directly involved in that process, but I mean, I can say generally speaking, yeah, this will go out to public tender. So there's a process that's got to occur. The design has been advanced. So what would happen is the detailed design drawings would be prepared, and then the tender drawings would be prepared, and then it goes out into an official public tender. They probably do. I'm just guessing here, but usually what they do is a request for qualifications, right, to identify firms that would be capable of doing a project of this size, and that way they don't have to go through 100 companies, and many of them may not be capable of doing work of this size, and then they'll go to like after that, then when they've narrowed down to a reasonable number of companies that they are confident that they're capable of doing the work, then it would go out to like an RFP type process, right, where there's they would have to respond with a detailed proposal.
Okay, and in some of the other major projects around Ontario, whether it's transmission lines, so we have transmission lines. It's just like they're drawing lines on the map in the south, and we've got 7 potential transmission lines that are going to be built over there. Just from the experience with some of the development in Northern Ontario over the last few years, some of the there's been a process where First Nation businesses are able to uh, work with the First Nation or well, it would be the First Nation to share our information on the type of businesses that we have and how we get basically involved or show our interest. And I don't know if there's any work that's being done yet at this stage to identify what that process would be, so that I know other companies have, as soon as the supply road was announced several years ago, I know there were people knocking at their door wanting to have joint venture agreements with the First Nation. Okay, so that's what I'm interested in knowing, what that process is, because if that's already been done and commitments have already been made, then depending on the type of business that we have, if someone's already a joint venture partner, then I wouldn't want to waste my time or waste Webequay's time to be able to have those discussions about entering into any kind of a joint venture arrangement if it's already been done. So
that process hasn't occurred yet. I think the intent of that whole process will be absolutely to maximize involvement by, and it'll be done in sort of a priority way by community members from Webequay, of course, first, and then next, that sort of the next level would be in neighboring communities, and then further out from there. But I mean, the one of the big objectives of a project like this is to absolutely maximize participation, whether it's procurement, whether it's employment, by Indigenous community members and across the province, right? And so there probably would be, as part of the process, some sort of way of collecting information on capabilities of different First Nations, right? To understand what resources are available that can be used, because to maximize involvement by First Nation community members, you got to know what resources are available, right? And then if there are, I mean, obviously as part of this too, if there are gaps in communities in terms of capabilities, maybe it could be incumbent on the contractor to, as part of their commitment, to help address those gaps, to help communities become more capable of participating in projects like this, right? There's lots of good examples out there, as you know. I know on projects I work on for transmission projects in southwestern Ontario, there's lots of good examples of trying to maximize participation by community members and different approaches that are used. So it hasn't started yet, but there's tons of great examples and ideas out there when we do get to it, to provide that structure to work from. So
that's very important, that
huge.
People in the local communities are the ones that are benefiting from any of the employment and opportunities, and also the training, but also when it comes to financial side, that there, any revenues that are derived from any of the projects. My position has been that you have to see those kind of financial benefits going back to the First Nation, and but not just here's a check and wonder when the other one, if there's ever going to be another one. It has to be very clear that First Nations are benefiting from any kind of arrangement that is made by anyone who is outside of that circle in the community. And the other part of that is that our experience has been that once the general contractor has been identified, and this is I have experience on both sides of the border. Once that general contractor has been identified, they use our material or our quotations. They use our, all our pricing, all of our data. This is our, this is the amount of Indigenous participation we have. I don't like using that word Indigenous because it's all about First Nations here in Ontario. But I like, what I find is that our information is used. General contractor wins the bid, and then they go and use their own people, their own connections that are not necessarily First Nations, and we go through all that, and we in the end, next thing you hear is someone else has been taken on to do the work that we spent a lot of time helping to prepare those bids. So I mean, that's just the way the work goes. That's the way that industry operates. But it's important for the First Nations to know that that there were other First Nation companies participating and want to see the goal achieved that they want, where those benefits, the people in the communities are employed by companies that may be outside of their, outside of the territory, outside of the north, so, but, and they may be First Nations or, because I've worked with a consortium of people before, and, it's not just one company. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that information.
No, and that can't happen. Those things that have happened in the past, that can't happen anymore. And there's so many good examples now of ways to prevent that from happening, right? And that's all it takes. And it's all in the planning. It's all in how you set everything up. Take your time and do it properly to actually really make sure that that those commitments are followed through on. There's lots of good major project examples. There's bad ones too, right? And I think that's a really important exercise to make sure this gets executed. This is a big project worth several $100 million, as you can imagine. And, the other thing I wanted to mention too is I think the word partnership is got to be used here too. This is, this is 2025 now, and for these projects to proceed, they have to proceed in partnership with affected communities. So, I think you're going to see that reflected in the end. I mean, I'm not necessarily directly involved in that stuff, but I can tell you the people that I know will make sure that it gets structured properly. I can say that for sure.
Yeah, I think it's. I think time will tell. Because in my own experience in the South, we have a lot of promises, but from general contractors to do work even in my own treaty territory, and yet they use our information, put in their bids, and then they go hire the other guy. So it still happens every day. But there's no way to really prevent it, but it's just something that needs to be on the radar of the people of Webbequay so that they're protected, because to me it's all about the people. It's not about that company and the huge revenues or profits they're going to make. I have a joint venture with one of the First Nations in the Lake Superior area, and every bid we put in has that amount that is was agreed upon with the First Nation in order for us to become to create that joint venture arrangement. And so instead of waiting to the end of the project where the revenues start flowing, we work at it from the beginning at the front end. So if we do any work, their amount is secured in the bid, and when we're paid, they're paid. So it could be, it's not based on any fixed amount. It's based on a project by project basis, so that I always want to make sure that First Nations see that benefit going into their communities, not waiting for down the road, but as each, you know, as each purchase order is prepared, once the approval's made, then the community gets their money too. So anyway, I thank you for, I don't really have any other questions that I can think of right now, but you've been very helpful in sharing information. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
Anybody else want the microphone?
No? Okay. Good.
I do have another comment, though, or question. Just to share information, who can I give information to? Because I do have. I just want to put our companies on the radar.
Sure. Yeah.
We have information that we can share.
The best people
with
probably would be the two ladies at the front desk by the door there.
Okay.
If you can share that with her, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
we want that radar screen filled, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
We want people
Thanks.
to do that.
Okay. Thanks.
Oh, just so just to remind everyone, if you want information on the project, supplyroad.ca, you can find out our contact information there too. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions. I think my name's on there, other people's names are on there. Just contact me and you know, we'll find what you're looking for and give you the best possible answer. One other thing I did want to mention too is how the project's actually going to be delivered, you know, financed and public-private partnership, the different structures, that's still to be determined, right? So, you know, there's a long way ahead of us. So those things like that, really once that's determined, then things start to flow from there and so that'll get determined in the next few months and that'll define, you know, the partnership, you know, between the community and whether it's the government or, you know, how is it going to be administered, who's going to own the road. Obviously, I think the idea is ultimately would be maintained by the community. What kind of, you know, there's other questions like what kind of access would there be to the road, or would there be restrictions on the use of the road? You know, because, you know, there are concerns and justifiable concerns by community members about people coming from the south, right? And over harvesting in the territory and other bad things maybe getting into the community. And so these are issues that have been raised and they have to get sorted out, and that's going to happen, I think, in probably the next 6 months, I would say, something like that. So don't forget supplyroad.ca. We're here for a little while longer. If not, get in contact with us and we'll help you in any way we can. Thank you.